In 1939, the Third Reich looked unstoppable, a juggernaut ready to storm across Europe. But what if the seeds of its destruction weren't in its armies or its ideology, but written into the very land it occupied? From the start, Germany was trapped by its own geography. Its most vital industrial regions were dangerously exposed. Its major cities were built in a way that would turn them into fiery death traps, and its borders were a strategic nightmare. Here are 25 terrifying geography facts that doomed the Third Reich from the beginning. The geographic prison. Germany's central position in Europe gave it the advantage of striking quickly, but it was a double-edged sword that ultimately became a fatal trap. 1. The two-front nightmare. Germany's location in the heart of Europe, without major natural barriers, made it permanently vulnerable to a two-front war. This strategic nightmare, feared by German planners for generations, became a reality in 1941, forcing the military to split its strength between powerful enemies in the east and west. 2. The North Sea choke point. Germany's coastline gave it only limited access to the open Atlantic. Its North Sea ports were penned in by the British Isles, creating a natural blockade. To break out, German naval fleets had to run the gauntlet of the heavily patrolled English Channel or the wide gap between Iceland and the UK, making any large-scale naval operation a high-stakes gamble. 3. The Baltic bathtub. While the Baltic Sea felt like a German lake, it was a strategic dead end. Controlling the Danish Straits meant Germany could bottle up the Soviet Baltic Fleet, but it also meant its own powerful ships couldn't easily access the crucial Atlantic shipping lanes. 4. No natural defenses. Unlike France with the Pyrenees or Spain with its mountains, Germany's heartland is dominated by the North German Plain. This huge flat expanse offered no natural obstacles to an invading army. Once the borders were breached, there was little to stop an armored blitz from either the east or west. 5. A hunger for critical resources. Germany had almost no natural petroleum reserves, a fatal flaw for a modern, mechanized army. Beyond oil, it also lacked rubber, aluminum, and certain metal alloys. This forced a desperate and unsustainable reliance on synthetic fuel and a strategic obsession with capturing the oil fields of the Caucasus, turning the entire war effort into a frantic race to plunder occupied territories before the Royal Navy's blockade could strangle its industries. The industrial heartland, a ticking time bomb. Germany's industrial might was legendary, but its geographic concentration made it a spectacularly vulnerable target. Once the Allies developed the planes and tactics to reach it, the heart of the war machine was destined to be ripped out. 6. The Ruhr Valley, a perfect bombing target. Germany's industrial heart, the Ruhr Valley, was a dense cluster of coal mines, steel mills, and munitions factories. Its location in the west, on the flat North German plain, made it an unmissable target for Allied bombers from Britain. Early in the war, pinpoint bombing was inaccurate, but the Ruhr was so jam-packed with industry that area bombing was just as effective. A bomb that missed one factory was likely to hit another, or the rail lines that fed them all. 7. The dams of the Ruhr. The industrial region was powered and watered by a series of massive dams, including the Möhne and Eder. In 1943, the RAF's legendary Dam Busters raid breached them, causing catastrophic flooding that swept away infrastructure and disrupted war production for weeks. 8. The synthetic fuel famine. To solve its oil crisis, Germany built massive synthetic fuel plants. But these facilities were huge and impossible to hide. By mid-1944, Allied bombers began systematically wiping them off the map. The effect was devastating. Aviation gasoline production plummeted by around 90% between May and September 1944, grounding elite Luftwaffe pilots and idling new panzer divisions for lack of fuel. 9. Schweinfurt's ball bearing catastrophe. A huge portion of Germany's ball bearings, an essential component for everything from tanks to aircraft, were made in the city of Schweinfurt. The Allies launched a series of massive, costly raids in 1943. American bomber losses were horrific, but the damage caused critical production bottlenecks that rippled through the entire armaments industry. 10. The dispersal dilemma. To counter the bombing, Albert Speer ordered factories to be broken up and moved to smaller, hidden locations, or even underground. But this was a geographic nightmare. It shattered efficient production lines and put immense strain on Germany's already fragile railway system, which was itself a primary bombing target. The urban canyons of defeat. Allied bombing didn't just cripple industry, it turned Germany's own cities into death traps. The very way they were built made them susceptible to a terrifying new weapon of war, the firestorm. 11. Hamburg's apocalyptic firestorm. In July 1943, Operation Gomorrah targeted Hamburg, dropping high explosives to shatter buildings, followed by incendiaries to ignite the debris, created a literal firestorm. Temperatures reached 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, 800 degrees Celsius, winds uprooted trees, and the asphalt caught fire. In just 1 week, 37,000 to 42,000 civilians were killed, many baked alive or asphyxiated in their shelters. 12. The medieval city flaw. Many German cities had historic medieval centers with narrow streets and timber-framed buildings. While beautiful, this geography was lethally flammable. An RAF raid on Lübeck in 1942 proved these cores could be burned down with terrifying efficiency. This tactic was perfected in the February 1945 firebombing of Dresden, which incinerated the city center and killed an estimated 25,000 people. 13. Berlin, a ruined capital on an open plain. The bombing campaigns turned German cities into seas of rubble, which made ground defense almost impossible by blocking tanks and emergency services. Nowhere was this more true than Berlin. The capital sat on a wide, open plain, making it an easy bombing target. When the Soviets attacked in 1945, the battle was fought in a landscape of ruins, a street-by-street rat war, where Germany's geographic heart became its tomb. The way geography sealed Germany's fate is a story that isn't told often enough. If you find this look at the hidden vulnerabilities of the Third Reich as fascinating as we do, make sure you're subscribed and have hit the bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next. The Eastern Quagmire. If Western geography was a prison, the East was an endless, devouring void. The vast, featureless plains of the Soviet Union would swallow the German army whole. 14. A front with no end. At its peak, the Eastern Front stretched over 1,800 miles, an impossibly long line to defend. Unlike the contained fronts of World War I, this was a war of movement across a vast expanse with no clear geographic anchor points. 15. The tyranny of distance. The German concept of blitzkrieg relied on short, sharp campaigns. But in Russia, the distances were immense. Supply lines stretched to the breaking point. A logistical nightmare of thousands of miles of poor roads and different railway gauges that left panzer divisions stranded deep in enemy territory. 16. Stalingrad's geographic trap. The city of Stalingrad stretched for nearly 30 miles along the western bank of the Volga River. Capturing it was key to cutting Soviet supply lines and securing the flank for the push to the Caucasus oil fields. But its long, thin shape made it a death trap. 17. The river as a shield. The Germans could attack from the north, west, and south, but the Volga River to the east became the Soviets' lifeline. Under cover of darkness, Boats ferried in just enough men and supplies to keep the defense alive, while the Germans were bled white in a costly, head-on urban war. 18. Ravines of reinforcement. The terrain around Stalingrad was cut by deep ravines known as balkas. These natural trenches were invisible to German air reconnaissance and allowed the Soviets to hide and funnel reinforcements directly into the city, constantly feeding the meat grinder. 19. Operation Uranus. The pincer from nowhere. The German flanks outside Stalingrad were held by weaker Romanian and Hungarian armies. The Soviets used the flat, open steppe around the city to launch a massive pincer movement, Operation Uranus, encircling the entire German Sixth Army in a colossal trap with no escape. The final collapse. In the end, all of Germany's geographic flaws combined to create a swift and total collapse. With its industry in ruins and its armies bled dry, the lack of natural defenses meant the end came with terrifying speed. 20. The Ardennes Gamble. In a last-ditch effort, Hitler launched the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, attacking through the hilly and forested Ardennes region, the same terrain he'd used to bypass the Maginot Line in 1940. He hoped the difficult terrain and bad weather would neutralize Allied air power. 21. A forest of fuel shortages. The plan hinged on capturing Allied fuel dumps to sustain the advance. But the forested hilly terrain slowed the panzers down, burning even more fuel. When the panzers failed to capture the depots and the weather cleared, the offensive literally ran out of gas, leaving elite German units stranded and exposed. 22. The Rhine, the last barrier. The Rhine River was Germany's last major geographic defense in the West. In March 1945, American forces famously captured the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen before the Germans could demolish it. Once across the Rhine, Allied armies poured onto the North German plain with nothing to stop them. 23. No place to hide. With the Luftwaffe destroyed by fuel shortages and a lack of defensible terrain, German armies were relentlessly pounded from the air as they retreated. The open plains of their own country became a killing field. 24. The race to Berlin. In the final days, the geography of collapse was stark. Allied armies surged from the west across the plains, while the Red Army, having stormed across the plains of Poland, drove into Berlin from the east, slicing the country in two. 25. The Shrunken Reich. Germany's defeat brought a devastating geographic punishment. The country lost roughly 25% of its pre-war territory, with its eastern border pushed permanently back to the Oder-Neisse line, a permanent scar on the map of Europe. From the choked waters of the North Sea to the endless plains of Russia, from the exposed industrial heart of the Ruhr to the flammable cores of its own cities, the geography of the Third Reich was a death sentence, waiting to be carried out. Battles, technology, and ideology all played their part. But the unchangeable facts of the map created vulnerabilities that, once exploited, made defeat inevitable. The land meant to sustain a 1,000-year Reich helped ensure it would last only 12.